You've spent years being someone they admire. But have you ever stopped to ask, is that someone even you? Every time you fake a smile when you want to scream, every time you agree when your gut says no, every time you offer your silence to keep the peace, you're not being kind. You're slowly vanishing. We call it loyalty, generosity, strength. But more often than not, it's something darker. It's self-abandonment. You've built a version of yourself for the world to accept. But somewhere along the way you forgot that you're not that version. Carl Jung called this the persona, a social mask, a necessary filter between the self and society, that helps us fit in, survive, be liked. But the tragedy begins when we confuse the mask with the face underneath. You don't even realize it's happening. You walk into a room and instinctively assess, what do they need from me? What will they reject? What version of me will make them feel comfortable? You become a shapeshifter, not out of choice, but out of survival. You've traded truth for approval, and now your energy is leaking through the cracks of that mask. The cost? Unseen, unheard, unheld. Jung warned us that the more we identify with the persona, the further we drift from the self, the authentic, unedited you beneath the performance. But this isn't just a psychological concept, it's a spiritual injury, because you were not born to be pleasing. You were born to be whole. You weren't born this way. You didn't come into this world thinking, I must be helpful, I must be pleasant, I must never upset anyone. But somewhere early, maybe in a quiet living room filled with tension, or a classroom where your silence was praised more than your honesty, you learned. You learned that your anger made people uncomfortable, that your sadness made you a burden, that being good meant being agreeable. And so you adapted, not by logic, but by emotional survival. Alfred Adler described this as a compensatory mechanism. When the human desire for belonging twists itself into performance, you learn that approval is conditional, love conditional, safety conditional. And from those silent lessons, you begin constructing a persona, a carefully edited version of you, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the overachiever, the strong one, the quiet one. But here's the paradox. The more people praise you for who you're not, the harder it becomes to be who you are. And somewhere inside, a voice goes quiet. The voice that once said, I'm tired, I'm angry, I need something too. That voice gets buried, not because you're weak, but because you were taught that your needs were dangerous. When you bury your voice for too long, it doesn't die. It moves. It sinks into the darker corners of your psyche. Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, a vault for everything we were told not to feel. Anger, selfishness, jealousy, desire, truth. You were told these were bad, so you locked them away. But what's locked away is never gone. It leaks. Through resentment, through anxiety, through chronic fatigue, through the growing sense that something is wrong, even when everything looks fine. You see, people-pleasing isn't just a habit. It's a defense, a way of avoiding the confrontation with your shadow. Because if you were to say no, if you were to express anger, if you were to name what you really want, you'd feel guilt, you'd feel fear. You'd feel shame. And those feelings, those are the guardians of your shadow. But here's the hard truth. You can't heal by avoiding. As Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You have to walk toward the thing you fear. To say, yes, I have needs. Yes, I have rage. Yes, I'm tired of being everything for everyone but myself. This is not selfish. This is integration. It's reclaiming all of who you are, not just the polished parts. You're finally starting to see the mask. You're beginning to hear the voice underneath it. But the moment you try to act differently, something tightens inside. You say no, and guilt floods in. You set a boundary, and shame whispers, "You're being difficult." You speak your truth, and fear claws at your chest. They'll leave. They'll judge. They'll think I've changed. These are not coincidences. These emotions were installed early as internal alarms. They go off anytime you step outside your role. Guilt is not proof you are wrong. It's proof that you're disobeying an invisible script. That script says, be pleasant or you're unworthy. Be strong or you're weak. Be quiet or you're too much. But you didn't write this script. It was written by family dynamics, social expectations, childhood wounds. By a world that rewards control and punishes authenticity. Psychologist Ichiro Kishimi and philosopher Fumite Koga, in The Courage to be Disliked, reveal this core trap. When your worth is tied to others' acceptance, you sacrifice your own agency. You become what they want, not what you are. And the worst part? You begin to believe it. You begin to think, if they don't approve of me, maybe I'm not worth approving. That's the lie. And guilt is its gatekeeper. That you've been taught that guilt is a warning sign, a red flag that says stop, turn back, you're doing something wrong. But here's a deeper truth. Guilt doesn't always signal a moral failure. Sometimes it signals growth. Guilt is what arises when you break a rule, even if the rule was designed to keep you small. Think of it like this. When you first start asserting yourself, saying no, setting a boundary, expressing a truth that isn't sugar-coated, your nervous system reacts. You feel wrong. You feel like a bad person. But you're not a bad person. You're a person stepping outside of a role you never consciously chose. That guilt is just the sound of your programming protesting. It's the old self whispering, but we've always been the one who says yes, the one who fixes things, the one who stays quiet. And yes, the first few times will hurt. You'll feel the discomfort rise like a wave. You'll be tempted to take it back. Apologize. Smooth it over. Don't. Pause. Stay. Feel it. Because every time you hold that tension without collapsing, you teach your nervous system something new. I can survive disappointing someone. I can say no and still be safe. I can express who I am and not lose love. This is conscious disobedience. Small acts of defiance against the inner tyrant that says, you must earn your worth. You're not lashing out. You're not rebelling to hurt anyone. You're choosing, intentionally, to live aligned with your truth. And that's what real freedom looks like. Not the absence of guilt, but the ability to walk through it without letting it define you. You've likely lived your life walking on emotional eggshells, monitoring people's tones, watching for disappointment, filtering your truth through a lens of, will this upset them? But here's the hard truth. You are not responsible for other people's emotions, and managing their comfort at the expense of your own integrity is not compassion. It's self-erasure. Yes, empathy is beautiful. Yes, kindness matters. But not when it becomes a weapon turned inward. Let's say it plainly. It is not your job to keep everyone else happy. It is not your role to absorb every discomfort in the room. It is not love to abandon yourself in the name of harmony. What you've called being considerate has often been a form of self-neglect. And underneath it, a fear. If I disappoint them, I'll be punished. If I say no, they'll withdraw. If I prioritize myself, they'll say I'm selfish. But let's reframe that. There is a difference between selfishness and self-respect. Selfishness says only I matter. Self-respect says I matter too. Selfishness dominates. Self-respect disrupts the lie that you only have value when you serve. Carl Jung taught us that when we deny a part of ourselves long enough, it doesn't disappear, it retreats into the unconscious and acts out through resentment, fatigue, illness, or quiet despair. So here's the truth. That no you're afraid to say? It might be the most sacred word you'll ever speak. It's not an attack. It's not rejection. It's a declaration. I am choosing presence over performance. I am choosing a life that reflects who I am, not who others need me to be. And every time you say no when you mean no, you reclaim a little piece of yourself. You take back a little time, a little energy, a little freedom. And these moments, though small, are the bricks of your authentic life. You've likely been taught that boundaries are walls, harsh, selfish, even aggressive, but they're not. A true boundary is not a weapon. It's not a punishment. It's a doorway, the only doorway through which real connection can begin. Because without boundaries, what people connect with isn't really you. It's a role. A filtered version of you, edited for approval, softened to avoid tension, pleasing to the point of invisibility. But here's the truth. Connection built on performance is not connection at all. So let's begin where most of us never do. How to speak a boundary. Not with apologies. Not with elaborate justifications. Just truth, calm, grounded, and clear. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that right now. I need some space. No, thank you. Say it once, without trembling, without a smile that betrays your discomfort, and then hold it, because what you're really doing in that moment is not just saying no to someone else. You're saying yes to yourself. Now, here's the part most people don't talk about. When you start setting boundaries, some people will not like it, especially those who benefited from your silence, your flexibility, your endless yes. And this is where many people cave. They equate resistance with doing something wrong. But let me reframe that. Resistance is often a sign you're doing something right. It means you're shifting a dynamic that has long been unbalanced. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And to do that, you have to stop negotiating your truth for temporary peace. You might lose some relationships. But if those relationships only worked when you abandoned yourself, they weren't relationships. They were performances. And when you stop performing, something profound happens. You start to attract people who aren't interested in a mask, but in you, your presence, your truth, your full humanness. And that is the soil where real connection grows. Let's ask the question most people avoid. Do your relationships truly reflect your growth or maintain your mask? Because every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you dim your truth for the sake of harmony, you're not just lying to yourself. You're inviting others to love a version of you that doesn't exist. And over time, that lie compounds. You look around and realize, I feel alone even when I'm surrounded. Why? Because when people know only your persona, you are never really seen. You're tolerated, appreciated, but not met. This is why reevaluating your relationships is not betrayal. It is self-respect. Start simply. Who drains your energy even in silence? Who praises your strength but never notices your fatigue? Who only shows up when you're useful? And most tellingly, who becomes uncomfortable when you begin to change? These are not coincidences. Some relationships were built on your self-abandonment. They work only when you're small. And when you start to grow, to speak, to take up space, these people will call it selfish or dramatic or distant. But what they're really saying is, I liked you better when you were easier to manage. Here's where it gets subtle. Sometimes control comes wearing the mask of care. Sounds like, I'm just worried about you. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. Are you sure this boundary thing isn't going too far? These comments are not always malicious, but they reveal a discomfort with your self-definition. They come from people who are used to your silence, not your sovereignty. And it's painful, because you want to be understood. You want your growth to be celebrated, not feared. But the truth is this: some people are not capable of meeting the real you, because they've built their comfort around who you pretended to be. So what do? You stop trying to be understood. You stop shrinking yourself to avoid discomfort. You start looking for those who see your no as clarity, not conflict. Who welcome your boundaries as honesty, not betrayal. You begin choosing people who meet you, not manage you. Because here's the deeper truth. Every time you abandon yourself for someone else's comfort, you abandon the possibility of ever being truly loved. You've started to reclaim your truth. You've said no. You've begun to confront the cost of your people-pleasing patterns. But there's one more place where this old script often survives. In your voice. Even after setting a boundary, you may find yourself explaining, justifying, softening, still trying to manage how others feel about your truth. That too is a performance. Here's a hard but liberating truth. You are not responsible for managing someone else's reaction to your truth. When you say what's real for you, kindly, clearly, and without apology, you're honoring your part of the relationship. The rest? That's not your burden. It's the difference between saying, "I'm so sorry, I know this is inconvenient, I just really can't," versus, "I'm not available for that. Thank you for understanding." One defends your right to exist. The other begs for permission to breathe. This shift may feel foreign at first, because when your voice has been shaped to soothe others, truth feels rude. But it's not. Truth is clarity. Truth is the beginning of trust. And trust only exists where honesty lives. Now let's go deeper, beyond the words. Have you ever noticed yourself nodding along in conversations, even when something doesn't sit right? Laughing at things that hurt? Staying quiet to keep things smooth? That's not listening. That's performance. Carl Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And in conversation, that unconscious script runs strong. It whispers, be agreeable. Don't be difficult. Don't make it awkward. But here's the cost. You never really show up. And so, no one ever truly knows you. To build real relationships, you must risk discomfort. You must allow space for disagreement, misalignment, even tension. Because without those, there is no real intimacy. Which leads us to the hardest truth of this part. Some relationships won't survive your truth. That's not failure. That's clarity. If your growth threatens the foundation of a relationship, you're not the problem. The relationship was built on an illusion. But some connections will adapt. They'll bend, stretch, evolve. Because those people aren't in love with your persona, they're in relationship with you. These are the spaces worth cultivating, where truth is welcomed, not punished, where silence isn't expected, where the air makes room for all of you, not just your agreeable parts. If you've made it here, it means something inside you is waking up. Not the part trained to please, apologize, or perform, but the part that remembers, I was not born to be agreeable. I was born to be real. You've walked through the mask of the persona. You've faced the guilt, the fear, the discomfort. You've dared to ask, who am I when I'm not who they need me to be? That question is the threshold. And now you cross it. Boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges. They don't push people away. They show others where you begin. They say, this is how I protect what is sacred in me. This is how I love myself while staying connected to you. This is how I show up fully, with truth, not resentment. You see, the world has enough people pretending. enough performance, enough smiling through silence. What it needs, desperately, is people who are rooted in their truth. People who are clear, kind, and whole. That starts with you. Your wholeness isn't a luxury, it's your responsibility. When you reclaim your time, your energy, your voice, you're not just healing yourself. You're changing what's possible for everyone you touch. Because when even one person stops performing and starts living, it gives everyone else permission to do the same. So no, this path isn't easy, but it's yours. And it's worth every moment of discomfort. Because the prize is not just freedom. The prize is you. If this series has stirred something in you, if you've recognized your patterns and felt the quiet ache of your own forgotten voice, this is your moment to act. Comment below with the words, "I choose authenticity." Make it public. Make it real. Subscribe to the channel. Because we're not done. This journey continues with deeper dives into shadow work, Jungian integration, emotional freedom, and relationship transformation. Share this with someone who needs it. Not to fix them, but to invite them into the journey of truth just like you. Because you are not alone in this. I'm walking it too. And together we're reclaiming the self, one truth at a time. See you in the next video. Until then, stay real, stay rooted, stay free.